Well, today's interview is going to be with Lou Quinto, who is a top executive coach and corporate trainer for Fortune 500 companies. And I love his take on leadership. And what he's going to help you focus on is how to make sure that the training that you deliver to your team gets implemented, not just handed to them. And then once you leave, or maybe a couple weeks later, you're back to where you started again. So again, Lou's going to help you out, but here's a little fun little tip. Lou and I went to high school together way, way back. We've reconnected and we're going to share some strategies to help you make your team better today. So let's jump into today's episode. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge, Now What? I'm your host, Glenn Pasch. And the goal of this channel is to help all of you who now find yourself in charge of a team, a division, or even a business, build the skills necessary to lead high-performing teams. Each week, we're going to focus just on one topic, and we're going to give some tactical strategies that have helped myself build a business, and Lou, my guest, help him build his business so that you can generate consistent results. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, just click the button below. Please share this out, and also please use the comments below. Let me know what you like and what you don't like, because I'm excited today. I have someone, this is a fun one for me. Lou Quinto. I'll let him introduce himself in a moment, but one of the fun things is Lou and I went to school together, high school together, after went our ways in college, and then all of a sudden we have reconnected, and he has some really great things to share on this topic of leadership and development, and I'm just can't wait to jump in here and talk. So welcome, Lou. Thanks so much for joining us.
Appreciate that. Appreciate it. I'm glad you invited me on.
Yeah.
As a co-host of a podcast, I'm very familiar with the format and with the work that is involved in putting these things together. And obviously, we all have one why that we're going after, and that is to educate and to inform people at a cost-free, I'll say cost-free because I don't charge anything for my podcast either. Yeah.
Neither.
And so it's just another avenue for people to learn.
Absolutely. So why don't you give the audience, it's a quick 30 seconds about who you are, what you do, and then we're going to just jump in and start chatting.
Sure, Glenn. Well, after I graduated high school with you, I've been that's over 35 years now. I've been working with companies internationally and primarily in the area of leadership and critical thinking skills. And I have found throughout that time that, particularly in the area of critical thinking skills, that what used to be an invisible need. But I have seen studies that CEOs and executives and companies have truly identified critical thinking and leadership skills as two of the most important competencies that individuals that want to move up into the organization and take over, they are lacking right now.
Right.
And so I have spent my time, when I say critical thinking skills, I'm talking problem solving, decision making, strategic planning, all of that. But what I find, particularly in the area of leadership that we'll be talking about, is that critical thinking is a very important aspect of leadership, because good leaders make good decisions. They make timely and accurate decisions. They solve problems effectively, and they also encourage creativity in order to come up with great solutions. Because as you and I both know, in these days of COVID, that if anyone in the organization says, well, that's the way we've always done it, they're a dinosaur.
Yes.
And so creativity has to be at the forefront of every individual, because the way you used to do it ain't going to be the way we do it in whatever we call the new normal that we're going to experience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was discussing that with some clients of mine, saying that, pre-COVID, some of these new ways of doing things, they were dipping their toe in the water, maybe a little bit, as you said, critical thinking, but there was no impetus. There was they still felt they had time on their hands to wait. And then all of a sudden, this just pushed everybody into the pool. And
Yeah.
to your point is, they had to get creative,
Yeah.
right? So for some of my clients that were automotive dealers, the doors were shut. And the
Mm-hmm.
only way they could sell was figuring out a way to communicate with the customer online, do the process online, be willing, which is the big one, be
Yeah.
willing to share information so that someone can say, great, let's do it. And then I just come and pick up the vehicle. That wouldn't have happened. I had someone who was on a panel of mine at our most recent virtual conference, and he said in the past 3 months, automotive dealers have shared more information with their customers online or on the phone than they have for the last 30 years because they had to. Right. And to your
Yeah.
point, I think that's a really thing I want to unpack that a little bit, is this
Yeah.
concept of timely decisions. Sometimes you're forced, sometimes you can actually plan.
Right.
So let's start out with as you said, you've done work with major corporations internationally.
Yep.
When somebody rings you up and says, I need you to come in, is there a common need? I know each company might be a little different, but what's one of the major things when you arrive, you go, up, here we are. Is it a here we are again, or is a lot of that different? Does that make sense?
Actually, here in the U.S., it's here we go again,
Right.
because when it comes to learning and developing,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are industries and companies outside of our borders that do a lot better job than we do in the U.S. I
Okay.
know that when I go over to Canada and I'm working with a client in Canada and I'm doing a training seminar, whether I'm facilitating a group through a
Mm-hmm.
strategic plan, these people are at the edge of their seat. And I know it's not because I'm a dynamic speaker, although I'd like to think that. But I believe that here in the U.S., training, particularly in the area of leadership, is something that in many instances an executive will hand off to the HR person and say, go
Right.
do that leadership thing so that this way we can get our leaders to be truly leaders. And so when I go into a company, what I find out is, and I'm glad you brought this up, I like to sit back and watch first, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to believing 100% of what the client is telling me their problem is,
Right.
that I just react to that. Because I have found in many instances the way they view something as an insider, and the way then that I come in and I view things as an outsider using the experience and the knowledge that I have going to different companies and seeing different business models, how people operate, what they do, that a lot of times what they believe is going on is not actually going on. And so I like to get down into the front lines
Right.
and talk to people. I like to talk to, if I'm going to do executive coaching, I like to talk to the people, that the individual who I'm going to be coaching, what they think about that particular leader and
Right.
or
Right.
their
Right.
manager, to make sure, and I always am leery when I ask somebody, because it's usually one of my first questions. So, how are you doing on your job? And they'll respond to me that, well, I haven't heard from my boss in a long time, so I must be doing a good job. And
Right.
immediately bells go off in my head, because that means that that's just a leader who's catching people doing something wrong
Mm-hmm.
instead of catching people doing something right. So
Right.
when you have people that are telling you that, you're really, and again, this goes back to the critical thinking, you're uncovering root causes to situations. And so it's really a situation that when I go in, and again, I hate to say it, but yeah, here it is all over again. It's like Groundhog Day in many instances, except the faces are different.
Do you think that, and I just wanted to touch on, when you go to, say, Canada,
Right.
right? Because I've spoken in Canada and I've spoken internationally as well. Do you think they're on the edge of your seats also because they perceive the US to be further ahead in some ways and they're looking for an edge? Or is it just they're more receptive to it? What do you think?
I would say that they're more receptive to it
Hmm.
because they are in an organization that encourages them to grow
Right.
and develop as an individual. Here, I don't mean to be historic or anything, but the U.S. business models for so long have been extrinsic motivated type of models where it's the carrot and the stick. You do a great job, you get a bonus. You do, you meet your numbers, you're going to get an increase.
Right.
And there's not really an effect toward that intrinsic value where people go to work and they say to themselves, I want to be here. I want to explore new things. I just don't want to go through, 8 to 5 and do the same thing I do day in and day out. I think studies have shown recently that 85% of most employees are not happy in their job.
Right.
And you've got to ask yourself, why is that? Why are they going and spending 8 to 10 hours a day, 40 to 50 hours a week, doing something or in a position that they're not happy in? And
Right.
so it's one of those things, again, looking at the Canadian, I won't call it business model, Glenn, but I'll call it the environment that they create within business. It's much more of an environment of learning and growth. And that gets employees engaged and that increases the ownership. And so going back to your question, I believe that's why they're at the edge of their seat.
That's great. Yeah, I think what I see, and I think your point is spot on, is that, a lot of companies here, it is just about the end result.
Right.
And it's a very numbers driven or success. And the thought of time to develop a team, grow a team, that takes a very special leader to be able to give you time to do that. I don't see that a lot. I mean, I work very hard in my own company, but when I'm brought in to talk to companies and say, hey, can you help us with our process? The concept of training is usually very front loaded, right? HR driven, just like you said. It's very, okay, well, you went through our new hire training versus the onus on that leader, division head, business owner to develop their people. I think we always forget that. It's training and development is ongoing. And that means, to your example where someone would say, well, I haven't heard from my manager. Well, that means that they haven't built in their work job or their description or their time to go inspect, time to go watch. I always align it more towards coaching. Where, you have a sports team, where are the coaches? They're on the sidelines. They're watching you play the game. So if I am, it doesn't matter what my job is, my leader, division head, boss should be inspecting, watching me do my job. To your point, catch me doing something right before it goes off the rails crazy, we can tweak. But that's part of your job. And I don't think most new leaders are even told that's part of their job, because the person who hired them probably didn't have a boss that did that. And so we just continue to repeat that same cycle.
We're not learning from history in many instances. And they say that history is our biggest learning model. And if you ignore history, you're doomed to repeat yourself. And I think that's what happens in the situation. And going back to your point about, going through training, one of the most difficult thing, and you know this, Glenn, as well as I do, because you do training as well, that companies spend an inordinate amount of money on bringing in people like you and I to do some very good training, very solid, substantial training. But once we leave, the training stays in that manual or that participant book that we handed out. And a good leader in this particular instance, and I always recommend, when I get done with the class, I tell the participants, go back tomorrow morning and sit down with your boss and talk to them about what you learned in this class and how you think you might be able to apply it to some real problems and issues that the group or the team or the project or the division or the department is experiencing right now, so that you can go from technically what I'll call a theory application to a practical application. And that doesn't happen. So managers out of their budget will spend an inordinate amount of money to send people to training. And in many instances, Glenn, it's just It's checking a box.
It is.
Okay, Glenn's been through this training. Lou's been through this training. And okay, I've met that goal. And that's where it stops. And that's why I'm sure you use the term, I use it all the time. If you don't use it, folks, you're going to lose it.
And yeah, and I look at it very similar to installation and implementation, right? So you're coming and you're giving your training and you're installing it, right? Like a new piece of software. But if you don't follow through to figure out how we're implementing this into, how does this adjust what we're currently doing? How does it tweak it? Is it new, completely old way gone, new way? I think you're right. And the people will, consultants or trainers will always say, well, we'll always have a job because they keep bringing us back. I try to work with them to say, well, what are you going to do with this? Part of my work will be, what happens next? How are you installing this? How are you making sure that everyone is trained on it, short-term, ongoing, like mapping it out? I think that, to me, is where there's a big letdown. And I think you mentioned it early on. When a leader hands off the responsibility of process and results and to HR or someone else to say, you take care of that, well, then how am I going to know what's going on? It falls into the checking the box, and we all feel good and we got our certifications, and they're only, I'd love to hear your opinion, but very few people are that self-motivated to map it all out.
And I think it goes back to the job description, as you mentioned or alluded to earlier. And that is, in most people's job descriptions, it's meeting the goals and the numbers of the organization.
Mm-hmm.
There is not the emphasis on coaching and developing your people.
Right.
And that's where you get into the difference, as you and I spoke prior to launching the podcast, was the difference between management and leadership. Mm-hmm. You manage things. You manage your time, you manage your budget, you manage your processes, you manage your equipment, but you lead people. And by leading people, you're creating that environment that is encouraging them to learn continually. Because I think in probably the last 3 months, I've told many of my clients, we have experienced 10 years worth of change.
Yes.
Without question, we have been forced to really hug and love our computers in ways that we never did before. Right. And I know, like you, I've been that person who I enjoyed and really thrived by standing up in person in front of a group of people. And for years, I have pushed back on that virtual learning, the webinars, because I like to see people's expressions. I like to make sure that questions are being asked and answered. And the webinar didn't do it. But on March 15th, Glenn, I realized, when my business schedule, it was almost like taking an Etch-a-Sketch and just, shaking it, and went completely blank, that my clients were saying, well, we still want to do some training during this, what they were calling a downtime. Little did they know that we're going to probably be going through this for many more months. Sure. But can you deliver virtually and do webinars via Zoom, via WebEx, whatever it may be, whatever platform it might be? And I was forced to change my business model and to change the way I operated. And I think when looking at the people that we're working with and we're talking about, you've got a situation where, okay, my job description is meet my numbers, but there's no real job description requirement when it comes to making sure that people are meeting their development goals. And I think development goals, as well as productivity goals, need to be equal in that, and I hate to say it, annual review. Right. Because as you and I both know, annually is not where you need to be. A good coach and a good leader is going to be in front of their people constantly, and doing the one-on-one meetings. And that's a significant part of their job, but they're just focused on numbers.
But I think that also, you made a really good point, and I wanted to make sure we chatted about it, was while we were doing the pre-show, if a manager or a leader of a team is not, if that's not explained to them or mapped out, then I default to only numbers. And so
Right.
then I start filling my day with ways to push people
Yep.
to get my numbers
Mhm.
because I don't have time, or no one ever said, well, actually, part of your job description is to have these one-on-one meetings and teach them what that means and show them what that means so that they understand, if I spend my time doing this, the results will get better. But to your point,
See, you hit on that right there. And that is for those leaders who invest their time coaching their people and catching them doing things right to reinforce
Mhm.
what they're doing, as opposed to just catching them doing something wrong and then disciplining them for that. But they don't, if they spent the time to do that, they would be hitting their numbers on a regular basis because people will
Absolutely.
want to do their job. They'll want to make sure that they're meeting the vision of whatever the project is and the goals that are being set, they're being accomplished. But most people, and again, I'll say you probably know this as well as I do, when you go in and talk to a manager, a manager, and you ask them, how are you doing coaching? How much time are you spending on them? And excuse is, I don't have time to coach.
Right.
And that's when, again, bells go off in my head, red flags go up and say, this is an issue we have to deal with.
Yeah, because then you have to unpack it and, look at what are they doing with their time.
Yeah.
And they will, I'm a firm believer everybody goes to work to try and do their best. I'm just going to say, very few people have I ever seen who just go and purposely try to, screw off.
Right.
Doesn't happen. So if I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to start making decisions to fill my time, busy work, or duplicating my team's work, right? You had mentioned in the pre-show, which I thought was a really good point, is that if no one explains this, because I was really good at X, I was a good salesperson, and now I got promoted to run the sales team. Well, the only thing, unless someone is coaching me and filling my bucket with these new skills, only thing I'm going to do is default back to how I sold. And then
Right.
I'm going to micromanage everyone. And then it just becomes really oppressive. And whenever you're around, there's a fear versus saying, no, I don't have to do that. That's what I have you for. I now fill my day with looking at reports, strategic thinking, where are we going, how are we doing X, and then also spending time inspecting and developing my team, because that's not my job. That's my job.
Right.
Selling is not my job anymore,
Right.
right? And I just don't know sometimes if it's clear enough.
No, it's not clear enough. And, I feel sorry for the person who's been put into a position of a management, position for the first time because
Mhm.
they did well in their job. And now all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, Susan did a great job in selling. She'd probably be a good sales manager. And Susan gets promoted, but doesn't get the training on how to be a leader. And what ends up happening is Susan starts to feel uncomfortable because she's not performing in the job that she's been promoted into. And she knows she can be successful in the old job that she
Yes.
was. And that's when, as you and I were talking earlier, that's when people gravitate back to their old job and become micromanagers and tell people, well, let me show you how to do it. Okay, just
Right.
get away. Let me show you how to do it. And if someone's doing that to me, Glenn, I'm going to sit there and go, fine, it's all yours. You do it
But
yourself.
and I think people don't sit enough with, and again, this is the culture here of spending time. Great leaders have this planned out.
Right.
They have it built that says, when I promote you, I have to educate you on your new job. So what
Right.
I always explain it as, it's that concept of managing up, managing down. But if I get promoted to now sales manager, that means I'm on someone's team,
Right.
different team. I have
Hmm.
different. So who's running that team, right? So now I report to the general manager, so to speak. Well, that
Right.
means the general manager should be spending time with me on
Correct.
how to coach and train and develop those skills necessary. Then I can be a better leader down here. And sometimes, especially when it's a sales job, everybody loves the high, that buzz, that adrenaline of selling. And now all of a sudden, you don't have that.
Yeah.
It's longer term and you're caught more in other things that don't give you that buzz, so to speak. So to your point, unless I find excitement, fulfillment in coaching, in planning, in strategic thinking, then I'm going to run back to something else and go, well, I was really good over here. It's
Yeah.
that uncomfortableness. But I think that I think it's pretty cut and dry a lot of times when I see successful organizations, they've built those steps and they have people and they invest everybody at those different levels. And the ones that don't, it's congratulations, you're there, because the person who is running this new team that I'm on, they go, I don't have any time to
Right.
train. And then the person who they report to is like, I don't have any time. And it's just this constant vicious sort of gerbil wheel
Yeah.
frustration. And then it, to your point, is, hey, I need a consultant to come in here and help, check the box. And then you'll get a lift for a couple weeks and then it drops back down and they're like, can't
Because
move back in
yeah, people are like rubber bands. I mean, we can, while you and I are there, we'll stretch and stretch and stretch. And then when we leave, that rubber band just snaps right back to what it used to be.
Right.
And that's the same way with training too. When I go in and do a training program, just like you, it's one of those situations where when I leave, people are not reinforcing the learning, then companies are not getting a good return on their investment. And I offer all of my clients that when someone sits through a training program of mine,
Mhm.
that they personally have an executive coach for life in that particular area. So it's not like I'm going to solve their problems for them, but
Right.
if they have questions about a process, if they've got questions about, something that I taught them and they're having trouble doing it, I have no problem spending extra time with someone who
Sure.
sat through a program of mine and coaching them just on that area. So again, there's a big difference, and I make that distinction. I'm not going in and solving their problems, but I will say, okay, here's what I taught you. Let's take a few minutes, and I have no problem, free of charge, to help you through that. And I find that I do get people, maybe even 2 years after they've taken a program of mine, I'll get a phone call and say, I kept the manual, I've got your business card here, and I'm in a new position, and what you taught me 2 years ago, I need to really hone up on. And so can you real quickly help me in these one or two areas? And I have no problem doing that with
Right.
folks.
So let's pivot a little bit, because you've worked with large companies and maybe, smaller companies.
Yeah.
Are there similarities? I would assume that with, bigger companies, there's more layers,
More
but
bureaucracy. Yeah.
more bureaucracy. But do you find that the skills needed different for big to small, or they're, like, talk to me about similarities or differences when you're trying to help, or if you're taking over a team, let's say in a large company versus maybe a smaller company.
Yeah. And that's a great question. And with big companies, what I find is that you have little companies inside the big company.
That's a
And
great way to look at
because I'm in the IT department, and we're a little company. We've got 10 people and we're in charge of all of this. And so you do have lots of little companies inside of big companies that hopefully there's an umbrella for a vision and a mission that everybody's moving in the same direction. In small businesses that I've worked with, I would say there's more excitement because they truly see that they're creating something for the entire organization. When you're
Right.
in a big organization, you really can't see the impact or the effect that you're having on the big organization. But when you're working for a company of 20, 30 people, your work, you can really look at things that you've done and been part of and say, at the end of the year, when you're looking at, what numbers have been met or
Right.
exceeded, I was part of that.
Correct.
And I think the bigger the company that you're in, those things are difficult to, for someone to pull out the annual report for, a big company, Caterpillar, one of my clients, and say, oh yeah, look at here in the annual report, I was part of that.
Right.
I don't think that it's there. So I do think in the smaller companies, you have the excitement and you have that motivation because you can truly see the impact that you're making. On the bigger company, you're seeing it within the department, you're seeing it within the division, on the sales team, but you're
Right.
not really seeing the entire impact on the entire organization, if I can say that.
No, that makes total sense to me. So when someone's asking you, right? So if I brought you in and I want to pick your brain and say, like, okay, what should I be looking for, right? If we talk about this concept of leadership versus management, and you touched on it before, and I like that analogy of we manage things
Right.
and we lead people. You don't manage people, you're managing the tasks of people,
Yeah.
right? But you're not really managing people. If someone said to you, okay, what should I be looking for that's going to stand out when I'm looking through all the people on my team, right? I have to promote someone or I'm going to bring in somebody from the outside. What, you talked briefly about critical thinking. What are the things I should be looking for to, that people need to have, those skills or traits that they have that are going to stand out for me and go, they have a good chance for success? I still have to do my job to help them get there, but what are some of the raw materials, so to speak, that someone should be possessing to be a good leader?
Yeah, I'll divide that up into two areas.
Great.
The first area is using and hiring within. Okay, so promotions. The second area is on hiring from the outside.
Right.
And when you're hiring from the outside, you have to have good hiring behaviors that you're looking for and you're implementing, because when you're bringing in someone from the outside, there is a steep learning curve that they have to learn your business.
Yes.
And so that's definitely one of the competencies is how quick of a learner are they to truly understand your business? Because you get some people, sometimes they come from competitors.
Right.
Sometimes these are people right out of school and
Mhm.
who have no knowledge whatsoever. And you've got to take that opportunity to bring them up to speed before we even get into the some of the other competencies. They got to know our business.
Right.
And going back to the other one where we're promoting from within, many times we talk about succession plans, Glenn, and we talk about succession plans, and it's restricted solely to the C-level organization. And this is where many companies spend a lot of time looking at candidates
Mhm.
and grooming them to step into positions when they become available. They're not making any promises that, we're going through this, we're going to be grooming you for a promotion and you're going to get that executive vice president of marketing position as soon as it opens up. No, you're going to be one of the candidates that we will consider.
Correct.
And I believe that succession planning needs to be pushed down to every single level, so that if I'm just managing a team, whether it's an IT team or a sales team, I need to start as a leader. I need to start grooming people to take over my position.
Correct. Yes.
And that's when you start looking at the position and say, okay, what's really required of this position, to then identify the competencies that someone is really going to have to be proficient in order to take over your job. And I truly believe that succession planning has to happen throughout the entire organization.
Right.
Because if you do that, you're then, as a leader, you're able to move people in and out very quickly, because people leave. What do they say? Most companies go through anywhere from a 20 to 25% turnover rate over a 12 to 18 month period of time.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
particularly with the younger generation that's coming in that we're looking at, that's going to be our leaders. I'll use the term the millennial generation.
Right.
The millennial generation has proven, statistics show, they don't stay around long. And they're always looking to advance. And as a owner of a company, I want to make sure that everything I'm doing to investing in these people, they're going to stay with me. And definitely one of the things that millennials look for, and now Gen Zers are going to start coming into the market very shortly. They're graduating from college now, I believe. They want a place that they like going to work, as we talked about earlier, that they feel that the company is making an investment in their growth and their
Correct.
well-being. And that's part of that whole thing as well. And so if you push down that succession planning through all levels of the organization, I truly believe that, and again, it's not going to happen overnight, but over a period of time, if you dedicate your time to doing that, you're going to find that you're going to have better people in leadership positions. And again, it goes back to, if you do the work now, the numbers are going to hit themselves.
Sure.
Because people are coming in and they're motivated. And that goes back to what I talked about before. It's that intrinsic value, not the extrinsic. Do this, I give you this much money. It's that intrinsic. You've got to make people feel valued. During this time, one of the things that I've been telling all of my clients that I've been doing executive coaching for is, one, you want to focus on products and services, but the second thing you need to do is you need to focus on your people.
Sure.
You need to be empathetic. And there are two terms that I like to use with people, with a team. You want to make sure that they trust you and that they see you as cooperative. And when I say cooperative, you're open to their ideas. You're letting them experiment with new things. You're letting them fail and not criticizing them for their failure, but picking them up and saying, okay, what have we learned from that right now?
Right. It's coaching. It really comes back to coaching them. And I like that, because we are of a certain age, meaning that just we getting jobs when we were young in high school or even in college, there was no, how do you feel? There was get your job done or get out. And now it is harder for some managers who are older, who've been in business for a long time, to understand that. They look at millennials saying right out of the gate in the interview, where am I going to be in 2 years? And that is an absolute stunning question. You would say, listen, just do your job for a year and we'll figure it out. And they're not. They want to know what's next, whether they're going to get there or not. And they want their opinion listened to, or their voice, because their parents all gave them voice, which is good. But for certain managers or leaders of companies who maybe were not brought up that way, meaning my boss didn't listen to me, my boss threatened me. I agree. I think there is that value, and I don't want to let some of the viewers skip past what you said. I think it's a really important tool for your toolbox, so to speak, as a manager. Is your job is to find someone and train someone to replace you. So that you can never do more. Or else you would, if that's all you want to do, that's fine. But eventually someone is going to come in who can do it better, and you will be replaced because you don't have any other value. So it is a hard mental thing to say, well, if I train Lou really, really well, then why do they need me? They'll fire me. Good leaders will not. They'll say, great, Glenn took care of that. So now the team's fine. He trained Lou. Lou's taking care of the team. Now, Glenn, come on over here. I have another project, or I want to give you more responsibility. It is having confidence in yourself, but really have to have someone explain that to you. I would like to move you into another position in a year. So your job is to build the team, get the processes going, coach and develop them, and find a replacement for you. Who's taking over when you leave? Really, really important.
And most companies, even though they probably won't admit it, they do know that sometimes they get stymied because the right person is not ready to step into a position that's been vacated, whether it's vacated through death, retirement, whatever it may be. And when that new leader takes over, if they're not prepared, it slows everything down. And to be able to just replace somebody with someone who doesn't have the experience yet, but they have the knowledge. And they can with, again, further development, as you said, now the general manager should be the coach of that person. It continues up. But if that person already has skills and competencies that they are proficient in, then their learning curve is a lot shorter instead of being a lot steeper.
Well, they understand how to run a team, and they understand that. I think that's where the skills that we're talking about, whether you're coming in from the outside or promoted from within, each has their plus and minuses. But if you come in and there is a structure in place where you are developed and helped to do your job, and then you understand that someone's coaching you, and so you coach them. Just because you move up, then it's I coach down, someone coaches me, and no matter, eventually you keep moving up if that structure's in place. But to your point is, if I had to say there was one missing asset or function in a lot of companies that have inconsistent results, up and down, some days they hit, some days they don't, it's one of those, I call them the three pillars. They either don't have all their processes documented, so we know everybody's on the same playbook. There is no consistent training and development. And then accountability, meaning me personally accountable to do my job, which might be coaching and training, and they have accountability to do their job, which is whatever that is. One of them is out, but it's usually that development. We have processes, we hold accountable by threats and or fear or, hey, your numbers. It's that ongoing development, because everybody says, I don't have time. And then my question always is, well, what are you doing with your day? And then I do the same thing. I'll follow you around. I'll follow you around just on your hip. Where are we going? And I'll spend 2 days with you. And then I'll go, here's where this is why you don't have time, because you're not organized, or you're running in circles, or you're doing things that aren't your job anymore. Let it go. Stop micromanaging them, right? So I think all of that.
Yeah, with some of my executive coaching clients, what I do at the very beginning to them is to answer that question, what am I doing with my time?
Right.
Is I make them create daily timesheets, almost as if they were an attorney or an accountant who's billing their time for a company, and have that timesheet out. And when you start a project, mark it down. When you finish a project, go ahead and put it there, so that at the end of a day, at the end of the week, you can say, okay, here's how I spent a significant amount of my time. It would be great if it was almost like on your Android or your iPhone, where you have screen time every week. It shows how much time you spent on your screen. And then it says, here's how much time you spent, playing games, looking at videos and things like that. And you're thinking, oh my God, I need to get off of this thing. And it's the same way with a job. Where are you spending your time? And you and I can't follow somebody around for a week or for 2 weeks. And that's where I tell them part of their accountability to find out where they're spending their time is to create that timesheet. And then they can say, I spent this much time in project work. I spent this much time coaching and developing. I spent this much time on just garbage stuff, just answering emails and things along that line. And that makes you helps you manage your time. And so that's something a manager wants to manage, is his or her time.
I love that, because that's very similar to if you wanted to lose weight and you hired a trainer or a coach, they would say, write down everything over the next week, everything that goes in your mouth, and about the size of it. And then all of a sudden when you start writing it down, and even if you write it down in a day, it's sitting down at the end with your coach, or with you in this case, to sit down and go, well, it seems like whether they're doing something and it's taking too long, or it could be you're jumping all over the place, and no wonder you're not getting anything done. You don't have any organization to your day. Or why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And it goes back to what you said earlier. Well, they just need me. Or, well, if I don't help them, they won't get it done. And then I would always be, well, that's not your job. Your job is to coach them to do it. So either train them up or train them out, right? Figure it out. But you doing it is not solving the problem. You're actually creating more problems, because you're now falling behind in your work.
Right.
and you're not getting your job done. And then your boss is going to say, hey, Glenn, you're not doing your job. Oh yeah, well, I was helping them. Well, do your own job, right? So it is this vicious circle.
And I think for a lot of people, talking about that example you just used, I was helping them. A lot of people confuse that helping them with coaching. And then when you ask them, how much are you coaching your people? They say, I don't have time to do that because they've been disciplined. I shouldn't, I can't spend a lot of time helping them.
Right.
And so they really need to have a distinction in their mind of what coaching is and what micromanaging is. That's doing it for them.
Right.
And if you're micromanaging, you're a manager, not a leader. And so, you used the sports analogy before, but the coach, where's the coach? The coach is on the sideline, and that coach needs to be there constantly. And we've learned from studies that millennials like constant, regular feedback.
Absolutely.
And so the quarterly, the biannual, the annual review does not cut it for the younger generation, because they've been used to getting feedback constantly. And that's how they know they're doing a good job. And so when it comes to coaching a younger member of your staff, you need to make sure that you take that time to allot one-on-one meetings with them, so that you can sit down and you can always start positive by reinforcing, here's the things I've seen you that you're doing well. I want you to continue doing those. And then go to the areas where, okay, let me tell you some things that maybe you can improve yourself with. And again, when you're coaching, just like you and I coach, let them discover the answers. Don't give them the answers. They need to discover the answers with thought-provoking questions, open-ended questions. My favorite two open-ended questions are how and why, and then sit back and listen, because that's when they're going to hear themselves give the answer to the situation that is existing. And if you're just giving them the information, as being hired as an executive coach, I always tell people, I'm not Mary Poppins. I'm not going to come in here and solve all your problems for you. You're going to solve your problems. I'm going to give you the advice, and I'm going to give you guidance. I'm going to make you accountable for certain things, but you're doing the work. I'm not doing the work. I'm just lending you my experience to make sure that you are being the best leader you can, to make sure that the company is doing what it needs to do.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that's also a great point to sort of start to wrap up the conversation, because I think I still stay in touch with people who I've worked with over the years. And, maybe about 6-8 months ago, someone just on Facebook reached out and says, you know what, I always remember how you coached me and trained me, and I use it. He goes, the funny thing was, you never told me what to do. You just constantly kept asking me questions.
Right.
And I figured it out.
Yep.
And I think that's really what a good leader does, is question. One of my favorite ones is, what do you remember from training about X? Because now if I do that, or what do you remember our process is, then it's either they completely forgot, that's one way to coach, half here, or if they know it and they're not doing it, that's a completely different conversation. Then how many times do I have to tell you how to do this, and they're just in your head going, I don't like him, versus, well, why are you disagreeing? Well, I think my way works better, or I have this. Like you said, you start having a conversation with people, you start uncovering things. I think the best leaders ask questions. As you said, if I keep giving you the answers, I'm going to create a dependent workforce who can't think on their own, who will need me. That means I can never leave. I can't go on vacation.
When you go on vacation, they're constantly sending you emails, calling you. What should we do here? What should we do there? And so that's where, as a leader, you're pushing decisions down to their level, and you're letting them make the decisions within the parameters that they can make decisions in, budget-wise and things like that. But you're absolutely right. If you make yourself indispensable because you're doing everything, you're not leading.
You're just creating, that's making you feel good that people need you. And the reality should be, people would call me up, and in the beginning, as they were learning, I would say, well, what do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think we should do? I'd say never call me up and ask me, what should I do? I said, come to me with two, either your idea or maybe two. I was thinking this, but I'm also seeing this and I'm sort of stuck. What do you think? I said, I'll be willing to have that conversation all day because that's a training. But if you say, what should I do? Well, then why do I need you? You know, why do I need you in this position? But it is on the leader to understand that. That's really important because it's really easy to just give you the answer and go because it's time. But to your point, and I think this is one of the keys, is if you invest in the beginning with them the right way, later on it can speed up. But if you're just going, well, I'll have time, I'll just tell you, you're training them to not do their job. You're training them to come ask you all the time. You're training them on the wrong thing.
Right.
You're training. It's just not the right thing. It's just
not the right thing. Yeah. It's almost one thing that I always do, because employees love to come in and say, we've got a problem. And then they expect you to solve it for them. And so one of the things I always recommend to executives that I coach is that set a standard that if someone has, they've identified a problem, that they're going to define what the problem is. They're going to tell you what the impact is, and they're going to give you a resolution too. Because if they just come in and say, we have a problem, that means they've automatically tossed the ball over to you and said, now you solve it.
Yes.
But you need to condition your people, and I call it the PIR, using an acronym. So what's the problem? What's the impact? So we know what the priority of our work is going to be and resources we need to dedicate it, because we're describing the impact that it's having on customers, internal or external, whatever it may be. And then I want you to give me the resolution. What would you do in this particular situation? And that's where we start the conversation, not where I see a problem and then they turn to you.
Yes. And they basically just go, here you go. Nice big gift. I'll drop it on your desk and I'll come back later. I'm going to have coffee and then I'll end up doing what you want me to do. So, well, listen, we could sit here and chat for hours and hours and hours on this, but I think, there's so much here for those of you who are watching. I hope you watch it multiple times. There's just so much good information that Lou's shared here. On a variety of aspects. But ultimately, leaders have to you're not doing the job of the team anymore. Your job is the team, not their tasks, and investing in the people. And I really think that's awesome. Well, I just want to thank you so much. So can you just tell everybody how to find you, connect with you, where to find you on social, or how to connect with you? Because
sure, I'm on LinkedIn. You can connect to me through LinkedIn. You can shoot me an email, simple, louquinto@gmail.com. And also, if you enjoyed this learning, I co-host a weekly podcast that comes out every Thursday, and it can be a video blog, just as you and I are doing right now, Glenn, or you can download it on your favorite platform. It's called Q&A on Breakthrough Leadership. And we've been doing it about a year now, and we try to keep it to bite-sized pieces. So we average anywhere from 15 to 18 minutes. So it's a perfect podcast to download when you're going to walk the dog or, go exercise or something like that. But definitely, I appreciate the opportunity to give a plug.
Oh, there you go. So again, well, thanks everybody. Again, if you've made it this far, please connect with Lou. Also, again, as I said at the beginning, please subscribe, click the button. I release 2 videos right now a week, shorter version of just me chatting about a topic. And then I like to spend a little extra time with my guests, bringing them in to talk about from their perspective as well. Comments, please put in the comments what you like, what you don't like. Maybe there's a topic you'd like me to talk about. And as always, please share. As Lou pointed out multiple times, people need this type of help, this education, because a lot of times companies don't have it. They don't understand how to deliver it, and it really does impact the bottom line. So again, thank you so much for your attention. As I say at the end of every episode, you're in charge, but now you have a few more tools to help you become more successful. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time. Thanks again, Lou.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.